Originators are literally starving to death. You're watching a mass species extinction in the mortgage market. And the people that are surviving are literally only surviving because they are capable of making their clients more money than if they did not exist. Welcome to the Dynamis podcast, where we are all about unlocking a fruitful life, removing your limiting beliefs, and getting to the next level. My name is Tim Gurule, and I'm stoked to grow on this journey with you. As David Geffen says, we are each the figment of our own imagination, and some people have the greater ability to imagine than others. Welcome to this week's episode of the Dynamis podcast, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to do something totally different. We are in Austin, Texas. It's a continuation. I think if you've been listening, I'm out at my best friend Tyrel's house. Tyrel's an entrepreneur, and we did an episode about him with government contracting, and the conclusion of that episode was he's on his way to 30 million in annual government contracts, and he's looking for one key player to grow his business. And who's that player? Remind us.
Someone who wants to grow a business that helps small American businesses work and grow the foundation of America. Someone who's excited to grow a business to 30 million.
That's right. That's what's up. So we're going to do something a little different here. Okay. I typically interview other people, but we're going to switch it up here, and we're going to use this as an opportunity to reverse the roles. And Tyrel's going to interview me. He's going to drive the ship. We're going to talk about this podcast. We're going to talk about business and life. And we're going to flip the roles here. So take it over, Tyrel.
All right, Tim, welcome to the Dynamis podcast.
Thank you. Oh yeah. We're also in Tyrel's garage. So if you hear gurgling from hot water heaters or cars driving by, we're on the go here.
We're on the go. Primo spot. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what it is that you're doing right now to make money. You spoke about your exit from the fire department a couple of years ago and your jump into mortgages, and you talk about it on your State of the Market podcast, your episodes. But I just want to ask you, why did you choose mortgages?
Yeah, for a couple of reasons. So mortgage for me, if you've never been in a position where you've just had the rug pulled out from under you and you've lost your income on the fly, sometimes it feels like you're in a spiraling tornado. And so why mortgage? A couple of reasons. Number one, it's familiar. I come from a family of lenders. My mother has been a loan originator for like 36 years, I want to say. And I grew up literally listening to her take calls, work her pipeline, work on files, solve problems. Very familiar. Number two is I harassed every single lender I could possibly call as we were growing our real estate portfolio. Why? I want to know loopholes, tricks, tips. How can I use government financing to grow? I didn't really know what the heck I was going to do. Mortgages was familiar and available. I jumped for it. Okay. So I went for it, got the training and went for it. It was familiar. I understood it. What I did not predict is that I did not think that mortgages would end up being a long-term thing. I thought it was going to be a very short-term bridge. What happened was I found a weird niche as a value add inside of mortgages, and I unexpectedly find myself in this position where it's like, okay, I am probably going to grow. I am growing a long-term business in mortgage. Is it going to be the only thing? No, we're still investors. We're still entrepreneurs. We're still growing businesses. But I solve problems in such a dynamic and different way for people, especially in this market that is insanely cutthroat, that is competitive, that you have to have an edge in this market to make people money. It's almost like one of those things where it's like, I'm in it because I just can't stop right now because the people I'm helping are my friends. And if I were to leave, it's like, I don't know how to explain it. I just found a niche where I'm literally serving people that would have no other option right now.
What is it that sets you apart from other lenders?
Yeah,
because there are thousands of lenders across the U.S. What sets you apart?
We can get complex or we can get simple. To just sum it up in one sentence, there's literally nobody that cares more than me. It's just plain and simple. Nobody is up at night looking at macroeconomic data, predicting what rates are going to do the next day. Nobody is doing, real estate breakdowns of the neighborhood, historic trends. Nobody is looking at what investors are doing and flips in the area and what their budgets are. Nobody is connecting contractors and, other investors from the area. Nobody's putting together pro formas and spreadsheets and flip calculators for people using conventional bank debt like I am. That's my niche. Like I, first and foremost, see every single purchase through the lens of an investor. I see this as an opportunity to supplement wealth at retirement. What sets me apart in mortgage specifically is that when I sit down and listen to you, first and foremost, I'm deciding, are we a good fit? because there's a very particular type of person that I'm trying to work with. And number two is, do you have the ears and eyes to hear that this is a wealth building asset and tool? You know, you go and you meet with a wealth manager, for example, somebody who works at Edward Jones or these, you know, whoever. What are they doing? They're sitting down and saying, what are your goals? What do you want retirement to look like? How old are you? What's your risk tolerance? Okay. I think we can make you a plan that by age XYZ, you can have this much net worth. That is exactly what I do in real estate. It's not a one-time transaction. It's like, here's how I'm going to build your portfolio to supplement wealth at retirement. And here you can expect to be around this conceivably at retirement. Nobody does that.
I've seen you do that. I've actually used you for multiple loans now, personally and in business, and seeing the way that you work with as like the eyes of an investor, but working with some first-time home buyers, several first-time home buyers, some people that are new, maybe have cold feet, and the way that you handhold and explain things to them. And I think you touched on it. What I put with my experience with you is that you are client first. You are extremely knowledgeable and hardworking. What you bring with economic data is something I've used multiple loan officers in the past. I've bought plenty of houses, and I've never had someone say, hey, I'm looking at economic data today and we need to lock your loan today. Or actually, I think it's going to be better if we wait till Thursday, because daily you're looking, well, what's the job market doing? What's coming forward? And that's...
Well, and it's changing all the time, right? So those metrics, like dynamic. A metric that I look at this week may be different than a metric I look at next week. And I would have no ability to make predictions that were applicable to the market and the cost of these products if you weren't looking at macroeconomic data every single day. And what happens is the more data you look at, what happens naturally? You identify patterns. Instantly, you start to pick up patterns. And when you're listening to language like what the Federal Reserve is saying, when you're putting all of these layers, these overlays together, you can start to make predictions because you watch the market move in real time. So we had a friend yesterday who called me, you know, I'm doing a loan for him. It's a good friend of ours. You know, we used to work together with the fire department, and great guy, wants to use me, but he's a very logical human being, just like everybody out there. Our friends are not dumb, right? They're well-versed, they're business owners. And so I look at the market and I'm like, oh my gosh, we're kind of in a pickle here. The market's more expensive than when we first did your initial pre-approval. You know, it just took some time before he could get a contract worked out. And so, you know, the interest rate that we were looking at yesterday was more expensive than when we first did the pre-approval. And as I'm pricing every day. I'm looking at economic data, and every day I'm trying to find him a better rate, and I'm communicating and over communicating with him. And, you know, what does a logical person do when it's like, you're not hearing what you want to hear? Part of that is on me. Like, I'm communicating with him so frequently that he's like, geez, I wonder if it's like this everywhere. Right. And so he calls another bank. Well, he calls a credit union, and over the phone, this originator tells him, oh yeah, that's what you're being offered right now. Well, I can do better. Here's the rate I can give you, and it's at no cost, right? Well, first of all, this guy, we both care about him. If he would have, let's just say, gone down that hole just blindly and said, well, it's just the cheapest option, what would have happened is he probably would have been at risk for losing the entire deal. And here's why. Because first of all, nobody can just tell you an interest rate over the phone. It's such horse crap. Okay, interest rates are assigned to risk ratio, and risk ratio is assigned to borrower history, which is heavily tied to credit. If you don't have a history and you call somebody over the phone and they say, what's your interest rates? I'm going to tell you right now, and I don't swear on this podcast, but they're full of shit. 100% they're full of shit. There's not a way in the world somebody can just give you an interest rate. Not only that, you know, I'm telling him, look, dude, I don't think this guy can do that. That's not honest. However, let's assume that he can. Here's what's happening. We've had an overperformance in the job market, and the Fed right now is hot and heavy on inflation and an overperforming job market. Everybody's making market predictions that we're going to cut. Well, we've had some terrible inflation prints recently, and I can see on the economic calendar, jobs is coming out. Well, guess what? Before the jobs reports come out, ADP, for example, puts out a print of what their performance is. Well, ADP has been overperforming. And if the Federal Reserve gets a hot inflation print and a hot jobs report, guess what's going to happen? The market's going to take a crap. So let's just say that my friend blindly goes over because he's a logical human being and he wants to go to a bank that has the lowest cost, which who wouldn't? I would too. In that transfer, what happens is he could be at risk of losing the entire deal, because what happened today when the market opened was the jobs report came out and the market took a absolute crap, and rates completely disintegrated. I knew that. I communicated that to him. But what I did is, because I care about this individual, I said, here's the deal. This bank cannot give you what you want, but I am going to figure out a way from my end to get you that matched pricing, because I know that if you leave, you're at risk of losing this entire deal because the market's going to degrade tomorrow. I said, I don't have a crystal ball. There's no way to know for sure. It's too much risk. He stayed. I locked him. We woke up today and I showed you the economic modeling. The market took an absolute crap because jobs came out too hot.
I mean, that's the thing. Is it that you think, oh, we want more jobs, but not in an inflationary environment, right?
Not when we want rate cuts. It's kind of counterintuitive.
It's counterintuitive, but that's the way they want it. So that being said, not talking about the jobs market, but how is the market for loan officers right now? Because it's lean for, I know it's lean talking to my real estate investor friends. It's really lean for flippers right now. And that for realtors, how is it for loan officers? It's
not secret. It's public data. Go on and look at week over week, year over year, mortgage application, right? Builder starts, consumer sentiment. You know, in 2019, there was approximately somewhere around 600,000 loan originators in the United States of America. About 2 weeks ago, there's only 143,000 remaining originators that have originated a loan in the last 3 months.
That's less than 25% of what you just told me. From 600,000 to 140?
It's Squid Games. You asking me how's the market for mortgage originators? It's lean.
So then are the people who are sticking around, like guys, like you said, at this bank, because I don't know if the listeners know, but there's mortgage originators that work for Wells Fargo, for Chase, for these big banks.
Yeah. And
they're just meat in the seat. They don't actually care about you at the end of the day. Their numbers.
Well, it's not their career.
It's not their career. And their pricing isn't really better, but they can't go out of their way to fix a problem if you have a problem because of the parameters that are set, correct?
So first of all, most banks are super linear. It's essentially like what we call, they take a paper product, which means if you have a pulse, you work for a company, receive a paycheck, and you're buying a regular cookie cutter house, like that's what their bread and butter is. When you start getting into complex dynamic problems with something on the appraisal short or the inspection, or who knows, there's ADUs, or you're an investor and you're doing double closings or buying in a trust, or you need an investor loan, a DSCR, a debt service coverage ratio loan, or on and on and on, first time buyer, whatever it may be. And by the way, I know you mentioned earlier that, my client are these like entrepreneur investors. Totally true. Like I attract those types of clients because I speak a language in the transaction that other originators cannot speak. And one of my main value adds is like when I get a contract, I'm not just on the phone with the client walking them through performas. I'm also educating their buyer's agent half the time. And I'm on the phone communicating with the listing agent, telling them exactly the value add opportunity, the strength of the borrower's file. Like I'm communicating every single week with both the list side, the buy side, and the client. So everybody is completely looped in.
The options that you have, banks are confined to a box. They can't think outside of the box. Because they don't actually have those options. Whereas I've seen the products, I've used multiple products. Products are different loans, right?
Totally.
And so I've used investor loans with you before.
Yep.
For investment property. I've used VA loans with you and traditional loans.
Yeah. Traditional banks. I have a deal right now. One of our flipper friends came to me and said, hey, I have a friend. I found him off market. He's a wholesaler. He said, this deal's falling apart. It's his last chance. Literally, he's at risk of losing his earnest money, which by the way is in excess of $20,000. He's gone through 2 banks.
And to be clear, like to lose that money's just gone. If you don't close this loan for him, he loses $20,000.
Yeah. So they called me 2.5 weeks into, actually, when they called me, the contract had just expired. I looked at all of his data. The reason he's gone through 2 banks, been denied twice. He's a veteran trying to use a VA loan. He has a SBA default bankruptcy with a Caver's D letter, which means it's essentially this letter that follows him around until he dies that is preventing him from getting funding. USAA cannot handle it. USAA is, they claim, the premier VA lending source. A local credit union, which can do anything they want to do because they can hold little loans in their portfolio if they wanted to, cannot get it done. They called me with an expired contract, earnest money at risk, and told me what was going on. I looked at the scenario. I know for a fact we can close that loan because I just closed a client with the same thing, SBA bankruptcy. The guidelines are very, very well spelled out in this scenario. I took the application. I knew we could close it. I sweet talked the listing agent to giving us an extension. We got the extension, got the addendum signed. I submitted his loan into underwriting. I literally screenshotted, snipped, and highlighted all of the guideline regulations for VA loan, specifically relating to SBA bankruptcy and default with a Caver's D, submitted it to underwriting, and 3 days later got back a conditional approval. I took that conditional approval to the listing agent and said, listen, I can get this done. USAA screwed up. The local credit union screwed up. They failed to order an appraisal on time. I know for a fact I can close this loan. Here's your conditional approval. The appraiser's telling me they need till the 22nd. I need an extension till the 22nd. Otherwise, you're at risk of putting this property back on the market. I'm telling you for a fact I can close this loan.
You're not just helping the buyer at this point. You're helping the sellers, because the seller, as soon as it goes back on the market, you just explained 2 seconds ago that with the jobs market and interest rates are going up.
Yep.
So they're going to put it back in the market and have to reduce the price. And if you put a house back in the market, it's hurting that. I mean, at the end of the day, you are an advocate for the buyer. Like, you have someone's best interest in mind. Like, sincerely, you are helping these people fulfill their dream of getting a home or helping them out of a hard situation. This person had a bankruptcy. You say, okay, I can solve this problem. So it sounds like that's your niche. So you do first-time home buyers.
What I was saying is like, I started down this niche of investors and entrepreneurs. It's funny because the more you niche down, the wider your net gets somehow. I don't understand. It's this weird thing. But what happens is like, I encourage realtors to sit in a consultation. So I will not take a client if they will not sit down with me and we go through a thorough start to finish consultation. When I take a client, I want them to know intimately by the end of the process, every single term, every step, so that when they leave, if they never use me again, they are empowered to go do it again and again and again to build wealth. Look, this podcast, my life mission, all of it, I believe that America needs financial literacy, because if you are financially sick, we are at risk of losing our most precious asset of a free market and capitalism. When Main Street dies, we are in big trouble. And my greatest gifting to give back to the community is to empower people with financial autonomy, individuality, and literacy. So whether they use me again or not is less important to me than they know what they're doing to go repeat this process and become financially autonomous.
Right. Like I said, you are an advocate, and you're their biggest advocate for making sure that their money is protected and put to good use. Do you only do home loans?
The answer at a 10,000 foot view is no. But you got to think I'm so plugged into the investor community, and the outlets I have are infinite and limitless. So the contacts in my network can literally solve any single problem that I can think of to solve. So whether that's a private money deal or a connection that I can make to bridge that gap to get somebody into a temporary financing situation until they're ready and prepared to transition into long-term financing, or whether it's, cash for raw land. Like, I just have a network of connectivity that I can make handshakes for people to solve their problems, whatever front that's on. I had a lady today call me and she asked if I knew anybody who was an investor who'd be willing to do what's called a novation agreement for her. She didn't call it that. She didn't know what it was called. She said, is there anybody that can help me paint the exterior of my house? I don't have a lot of money. I need to sell, and then I'll give them that money back through escrow at close. The answer to her is yes, I do have those people in my network. I have a dynamic toolbox of people that solve any freaking problem you can think of. So, 10,000 foot view, is it only home loans? No, I can solve anything placed in front of me.
You're not one person. Even when you're closing your regular bread and butter home loans, it's not just you. You have a team, correct?
Oh yeah, I have a team. There's no way. I mean, I surround myself with people that are smarter, more well-versed. The processor and assistant that I work with in particular, my processor's been in the industry for 35 years. You think I know more than that guy knows about the back end? No freaking way. But the dynamics of the team, I know how to look at a deal through investors' eyes like he cannot. I know how to write performance like he cannot. I know how to underwrite deals like he cannot. And it's, the strongest teams in the market are those that supplement each other's weaknesses.
Not everybody's a pitcher, not everybody's a batter.
Absolutely.
Everybody's playing the field and, exactly like you say, fielding the ball for each other. So when the paperwork comes in, you can say, hey, this is not my strength. So when someone comes to you with a loan, they are getting the best coverage because it's getting multiple eyes on.
Well, there's no ego. I know a crap ton about loans. I know a crap ton about guidelines. I know more than I ever thought I would know. But on the odd chance of there's this weird freaking thing that you see once every 10 years, guess what? I have a guy on my team who's an expert at that thing. Without a doubt. It's not even a question in my mind. I know I have a person to solve that problem. And in exchange, I talk about my team. I do things that my team doesn't want to do. When it's Christmas morning or it's 10 o'clock at night on a Sunday and you're having an emergency and a panic attack and you're trying to understand what the market's doing and you hear all this inflation data and blah, on and on and on. Guess who's answering the phone at 10 o'clock at night on a Sunday or Christmas morning or Thanksgiving Day? It's me. Why? Because it's your transaction. Okay. And my job is to literally hold your hand and walk you through step by step and inform you of every single part of the process.
I appreciate what you've done for me personally and for multiple people that I know, just as a good loan officer, as someone who's hand-holding, as someone who's like guiding people through when you're like, oh, there's no business situation. There's no home closing. I've never seen one that is just perfectly smooth.
Yeah.
Every closed a loan, they're like, oh, everything went according to plan. And if it does, it's rare.
Yeah, it's rare. I'll say another value that I have, and you've experienced this personally, is I'll be the first person to tell you if what I have to offer you is not your highest value. I'll be the first person to say, listen, I know for a fact, you can get a better deal here for what this type of product is, without a doubt in my mind. And I would rather you go there. For two reasons. Number one, I care about you. But number two is I know for a fact you're going to come back to me for the next time. And I'm going to give you an honest opinion again. Can I do it the best or can I not? And I have no ego in saying I cannot. Originators are literally starving to death. You're watching a mass species extinction in the mortgage market. And the people that are surviving are literally only surviving because they are capable of making their clients more money than if they did not exist. You have to be such a value add to the marketplace that you are literally, if people do not use you and your services, they are going to lose money. And that's how you stay alive. And the only people that are left are either really good at faking it or they know what the hell they're doing.
Does that put you in a difficult position now because the competition is more? Or how do you look at that then? Is the competition more because there is just higher quality? Or do you look at competition's less because we're down to 25% attrition of what we were?
It's both. It's this weird thing. Of the available market share out there, look, here's the bottom line. You want to know what the bottom line is? If you go up and you pull, public data of how many transactions are happening in your single marketplace, and you ask yourself this one question. The market's dead, right? It's dead. It's a dead market. And it's true. It's stagnant, especially when you compare to how many professionals are in the marketplace. You pull up the data and you ask yourself this single question. How many transactions are happening in my single market? Let's just say Tacoma. Let's say Austin. Do I think that there's enough deals, more than enough deals in that one single market to keep me sustained? In fact, flourishing in abundance? The answer is probably yes. The deals are out there. Okay. The deals are out there. So there's more than enough for me to survive. It's my obligation to carve out a share of the marketplace. Economic downturn, hardship, that's the best time to make up market share. Okay. Of the available deal flow, though, it is insanely cutthroat competitive. I'm literally watching companies take losses on loans just to originate a loan to try to starve out the other originators, just so that when the market bounces back, they have a greater market share. Listen to that again. There are companies who are literally taking losses on each origination right now to try to starve out their competition and gain market share. Yeah, it's freaking competitive right now.
We've been talking about the buyer, but how easy are you making the agent's life? Like, is that something so
easy?
How I know that personally, when I've worked with you, not just because we are friends, but you stay in constant communication with the buyer. I see you do this. This past week, we've shared an office. So when I'm on my calls with contractors and I hear you on calls with clients and you are constantly keeping them up to date, what's your value add for agents?
It's funny because, man, agents do a lot of work. They really do. But at the end of the day, like whether the deal closes or not, it really falls on my shoulders. If the deal closes, I'm kind of like the guy that nobody thinks about or cares about. It's, congratulations, everybody's happy, popping champagne at the closing table. If the deal fails, I'm the first guy that they're mother effing all the way up and down. And there's a lot of pressure on that. And, you'd be surprised. Agents know a lot, but they know a lot about what they need to know a lot about. They have almost no idea about the financing side, the timelines, the economic inputs that really impact and are important to buyers. And so what I try to do is I try to supplement agents with a strong enough understanding and education that when they're talking to clients from the perspective of the financing side, they have, number one, a well-versed vocabulary, a decent understanding of what's going on. I'm constantly updating agents on what's happening in the market so that when they're having conversations, they instantly have a value add. And the other thing I'm doing is like when we're in contract, I'm over communicating. The first thing I like to do is I understand how you like to be communicated to. How do you like it? Do you like text message, email, social media? How often do you like to be communicated to? And then at a minimum, every single milestone in the file, everything that changes. Oh, now we're in underwriting. Oh, the appraisal's in. I send out an update at every single milestone. And on every Friday, I give both the listing side and the buy side a Friday status update. Here's where we're at. Here's what you can see in the file. I also give them access to let's say that we have a shopper out on the weekend. I have a piece of software that, if it's, they're submitting 5 offers and each one needs a different pre-approval, I give them backdoor access to where they can manipulate those pre-approvals. I set parameters, and my job is to make their job as easy as freaking possible.
Rock stars play with rock stars, right?
That's right.
So we're talking about the team analogy again. When you provide that much value and you're bringing it and you're saying, hey, and you communicate, you're going to receive the best agents in the market's business. I think you're seeing that already as agents are coming online and saying like, oh, this is someone that I want to work with because they are making my lives easier. They are making these difficult loans look easy to close, even if on the back end it's more stressful.
I don't think there's anybody that's going to go to war more than me or my team, especially in this market. And it comes down to what I opened up this with is like, no, I honestly believe that nobody cares more. Nobody cares more.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to transition now to talk about another project, another business that you're doing, which is this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd call it a business. It's more of like a tithe,
Why did you start this podcast?
Like I talked about, I believe in Main Street, right? Like America is worth fighting for, just plain and simple, right? You and I have both raised our right hand and signed the dotted line. Now, we find ourselves in this weird, perplexing situation as veterans, okay? And we can speak about this a little bit more dynamically and more comfortably. Something that I think you and I take for granted is we can, and I'm sorry for the swear word again, we can shit talk America well and comfortably. And the reason is because we raised our right hand. Right, wrong, or indifferent, we feel slightly entitled to have an opinion about the positive outcome of the future of this nation. And the reason that we feel entitled to do that is because, number one, we have friends who sacrificed their lives to do so. And number two, we potentially could have been those friends, right?
Yeah, it's skin in the game.
It's skin in the game. We have skin in the game. So, I believe America is worth fighting for. I'm just going to preface with that. I believe America is worth fighting for. I believe in the idealism of America. I believe in the words written in those wonderful documents that we have in Washington, D.C., the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution. I believe in those documents. I believe in what this nation promises. I believe in the potential of why immigrants come here from all over the world for the opportunity just to exist here. Now, this country is not perfect, but I started this podcast to preserve those ideals. As imperfect as this nation is, I started this podcast as a lifeboat for other people to take a hold of their life, to take action, and to implement strategy to achieve financial freedom, which will buy them philosophical freedom, which is, in my interpretation, the ability to go fight for what you truly believe in. What did God call you to stand up and do? Go do it. But it's very difficult to do that when you have to kneel for a paycheck. When you don't have the oxygen the psychological oxygen to take a breath outside of, can I afford my gas and my mortgage? My kids need to be fed. Let's carve out some psychological air, earn financial freedom, obtain financial freedom, and go fight for what you believe in.
That rings true to me. That's something that even on your podcast, so that 6 months ago, where I said, hey, I'm leaving my W-2 job for this to start a business because of something that I learned on this podcast. I heard a guest and said, I can do that. And I took action because of what I heard on this podcast. Like, you set out to give people philosophical freedom that will lead to financial freedom so they can have more personal autonomy, correct?
Correct.
Objectively, I would say you're doing that because we have other friends who have started businesses from what they heard on this podcast, what they heard other guests do. already listening to this podcast personally has made me hundreds of thousands of dollars in contracts. Other people as well. Listening to this podcast and implementing will be making millionaires within the next year. What you said, what your idealism, your philosophical freedom, your ideal America, because you're trying to give people their autonomy, it's already happening. And it's cool to see your vision for this being fulfilled already. But then the onus is on listeners to not just take this in, but take action, because you're bringing on amazing guests. Which brings me to my next point is like, you're also staying super consistent with it. What is the key to that? What's driving you?
That's a really good, it's a really good question. I like to believe that I'm in a place in my life where I afford myself ample grace. I am a person that internally, I think I would combust if I missed a week. And that's not necessarily the healthiest place to be, but I outwardly proclaimed, I said it to you, I said it to my family and my friends, I'm going to start this podcast. Well, I didn't define what that was other than a regular schedule once a week, as long as I hit once a week. We're coming up on 100 episodes here. In fact, I think this is probably 96 or 7. Whenever this releases, we're going to be right around 100 episodes. As far as consistency, it's straight up discipline, because I said I was going to do something and I have to just fight to find a way to do it. And not only do it, but provide value each week when I do it, because I could fill the air with crap. So it pushes me outside of my comfort zone because I made a verbal commitment to the world, to the people that I care about, and told them I'm going to do this thing. And I guess like subconsciously, and I don't know if this is healthy or not, if I don't do it, it feels like I'm letting everybody down. It's the same reason why I became an Army Ranger. It's the exact same. I told my family I was going to go become an Army Ranger. Do you know that I thought about that every single day when I was in RIP? Some people thought RIP was the easiest thing in the world. I didn't. It was hard. I thought RIP was hard. I did. I thought it was emotionally and mentally hard. Physically, it was pretty hard. I could handle it physically. Mentally and emotionally, it was freaking hard. And when I thought about quitting, all I kept thinking about is I told everybody that I know that I'm going to be an Army Ranger. What is it going to feel like if I come home as a failure? Nope, not worth it. Keep suffering. You just said, this is your ideal America. Well, notice I didn't say that it's paradise. No.
Right.
Fight. The America is worth fighting for. It's about suffering well, enduring.
That's it. I see you like as a diesel engine, right? You're doing 100 episodes, or you're almost to 100 episodes. In fact, you should probably make this the 100th episode to get interviewed. You get interviewed. But seeing it as a diesel engine, as someone who just starts something and is consistent and just keeps on running. Get up and go. It is just consistent and reliable more than anything else. And that, what I've seen in business, what I've seen in our friends who are successful, is that discipline to get up and continue to put in the work day after day. That multiplies the results more than any get rich quick, more than any, oh, I'm going to set this vision and we're going to hit this goal like in 2 weeks. We're going to hit this goal next year. That consistency is something to be admired.
By the time this comes out, the Corridor of Opportunity episode will have been released. So much opportunity, infinite opportunity opens up when you just simply walk in a direction. You know, half the things that have spawned from this podcast, I could have never, if you would have said, hey, Tim, if I said to you when I started the podcast, like you would have said to me, oh, that is going to lead to me doing a government contracting business, or our friend flipping land, or, you know, all the opportunities that are pouring into my funnel now from this podcast. And I'm connecting people. I'm connecting a Navy SEAL who's an entrepreneur building saunas to fitness influencers. If you would have told me that from the first episode of like when I said I'm going to do this thing, never in a million years could I have predicted that. But what happens is like on that grind of consistency, people start to pay attention. You want to know what the biggest benefit of consistency is people start to look your direction. Whether or not they like the content you're putting out, there's an unspoken respect from the community of like, dang, this guy's still doing it. This guy is still freaking doing it. And what happens is it attracts people into your network and it opens other doors down this corridor of opportunity that you could have never seen if you didn't even just start walking.
I'm seeing that in my own life. Like I said, from this podcast of hearing someone I never met, you interview someone, I was like, oh, I can do that. I did what he said. And then that led to a corridor of opportunities to influence people in my life that I've been on now other podcasts. Oh, that's crazy. But going back to what you're saying about your network and your sphere of influence, the people that you're seeing around has opened up your world. I'm guessing that this podcast has opened up your world immensely.
Oh,
right?
totally.
You've had 100 interviews. How many of those people were that you've now built friendships with after just...
Most of them.
Right.
Most of them text me regularly, ask me my opinion on deal flow. It's funny because it's like when I interviewed them, it was like, wow, these are people I look up to. They're doing way more than me, you know? And it's all of a sudden they're your peers now. You know, they're asking you, hey, do you know anybody for this thing? Oh yeah, I can make that connection for you, you know?
Seeing a bunch of different businesses, because you said you've interviewed people doing saunas, you've interviewed lots of different entrepreneurs. When you have a look behind the curtain and see their businesses, is there anything that you were like, oh, that's what I expected? Or is there things that actually surprised you?
Yes. And I mean this in the absolute most respectful way. Yes,
it was consistent, or yes, it surprised you?
Yes, it surprised me. And yes, there's consistencies. There are patterns. Okay. Alex Hormozi talked about the philosopher, and I can't remember who, but he said, you know, once you find the way, you could see it in all things. Okay. Patterns start to emerge. And I will tell you, and I mean this in the absolutely most respectful way, when you peek behind the curtains of high-level successful entrepreneurs, you start to realize that you have nothing to worry about or be ashamed of, because it turns out that nobody has any idea what they're doing. It's all made up. All of it is make-believe. But what I will say is that the intelligent people, that doesn't mean like the most educated. That doesn't mean the guy who understands complex mathematics to underwrite a pro forma. The most intelligent humans are aware of their weaknesses and, as fast as humanly possible, supplement themselves with individuals who are 10, 100, 1,000 times more intelligent and better than they are. And they build the team as fast as possible. And they do this one thing really well over and over and over and over. And it opens up other opportunities that they can bridge to by surrounding themselves with more capable people than them. What I did not expect is that everybody who's doing something is being rewarded because they simply took the risk. Nobody knows what they're doing. Nobody.
You're right. Everybody is human. And you look at these people, oh, this guy's a giant. This guy can do anything. But the through thing of this entire episode is no one gets there by themselves.
Nobody.
You talked about it with your own mortgage team. You talked about it with the agents, with the bankers. We've talked about this multiple times, that no one can do everything and crush it. But you can focus on your niche and you can build the team around you.
And what's odd is like the more you focus on your niche, the more wide your net opens to other opportunity. It just happens. I don't know how to explain it.
You know enough people that you can solve any problem. If someone comes to you with a real estate problem, there is someone who can solve that problem that you know.
Yeah.
Because there is insider knowledge in every industry that someone knows. And you know someone in that niche because you're interviewing these people. You know these people. And that's fascinating to me. And it gives me a little bit of shiny object syndrome. Listening to you, do you ever get that?
Totally. Every single episode is me shaking people's hands saying like, I wonder if this is the thing that I should pursue too. This podcast is about me learning. I want the audience to learn. I want them to have a life raft of this podcast to take action and build their life. I do. But I'm not an egotistical maniac. I don't know everything. I don't know a fraction of what I want to know. And every single time, the reason I bring guests onto the podcast and ask them questions is because I am genuinely curious about what they are doing. I want to learn. I don't understand. I want to pull my pants down and be very naked about that. I am not interviewing these people as like, yeah, I knew that. Yeah. And let's explain it for the audience. I'm interviewing these people because I want to learn from them selfishly, because they are interesting to me and I'm looking for a path.
Is that curiosity what motivates you?
Partially. And also the biological symptom that we all are born with. What's over that hill? I don't know. Let's look. Why not? Why? Well, because there's a hill. I've never looked over there. And maybe there's going to be better fruit in that field.
I feel that draw, but I don't know if that's the norm.
I think it is. It's our biology. It's how we expanded across the continents. It's how we have survived. Now, I have to be very careful with that because I do need to focus on one niche, but I am genuinely interested in what these individuals are doing.
But that leads us to the question of safety, because we've talked about people going back to your mission is you're trying to provide people with a way to leave their W-2 through this, or avenue. Hey, at least give someone an approach.
At least supplement income to where they do not have to kneel for money. They can stay in the W-2 the rest of their life. But I want them to have options to say, no, this is my line in the sand. This is my ethical belief. This is my philosophical viewpoint. I will not cross it, and I don't have to because I don't need to get on my knees for money. I have one master.
to that person, if there's somebody who's on the fence, someone who wants to take control of that, who doesn't want the safety to come from their employer, who wants to feel that autonomy, be like, no, the safety comes from, I've been able to build this thing. I can stand up for what I believe in. I don't have to do what the person says for a salary. What would you say to the person who is just getting started or hasn't taken action yet? Like you're talking to your audience, but I don't think I've ever heard you say it directly to the audience. What would you say to someone who's just thinking about one of the million things is that the 100 guests you've had on your podcast, and they're thinking about one of these ideas or any idea? What would you say to that person?
You asked me about themes of people I've interviewed, and this speaks to the guest that's listening that's never taken action. Something else that every single one of them tells me, whether it's in the interview or after, because typically when we get off the interview, I talk to them for another hour off the podcast. Every single one of them says that the biggest regret in their life is how flippant they were with time initially, that they wish they would have taken action so much sooner. Everybody doesn't take action because they don't know which step to take. People cannot have 100 choices in front of them to go down a path. They need 3 things. They need 3 clear things. Do this, this, and then this. And honestly, 3 is pushing it. So here's what I would say. To the person who's on the fence, who's never taken action, who's cautious and curious, and they know they want to break free, but they have absolutely no idea what they want, I would say, come into my circle, hold my hand, and let's do it together. In fact, anybody who's listening to this episode on the fly, I'm going to carve out everybody that contacts me through this podcast. I'm going to give you a free 20-minute consultation of my time. You and we're going to sit down, talk together, and we're going to make a well-curated plan of your next 3 steps of how to take charge of your life. Every single person that contacts me through this podcast, that's what I'm going to do.
That's a perfect way to fulfill your vision for the podcast, is actually taking action. And if you were listening to this and you're sitting on the fence, I don't know what to do next, take advantage of this. He's giving you a free 20 minutes to say, what are the next 3 steps in my life to get where I want to go?
Beyond that, okay, so here's the other thing. You want to talk about vision for the podcast? I'm going to tell you right now. I'm not just giving advice and interviewing entrepreneurs about their individual businesses. We're building businesses. You're building contracting business. Guess what I'm doing with you? I'm helping you build the contracting business. I'm making connections for you. I have a friend who's flipping land. Guess what I'm doing? I'm funding his land deals. I am actioning action. If you come to me and throw the ball, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to throw it back. I'm going to go find a team. So if you're listening to this episode and you want to get started and you don't know which way to start, you're going to call me. And guess what we're going to do together? We're going to start doing deals together. We're going to execute as fast as we possibly can. How are we going to build this thing together?
And that's exactly it. I can see that as someone who's used this podcast to advance my wealth and use connections. We didn't even jump into the other things you do, like your real estate meetup that we talked about on another episode. But I use the connections that I met at your real estate meetup to recently close on a mobile home park.
How many units? 32? How many is it?
Yeah, it's 34 units.
So you just bought a 34 unit mobile home park because you met a guy who I brought into my investor meetup. And it's vice versa. Like, our networks are overlapping. But here's the deal. I know we're running out of time. So here's the deal. If you DM me directly to the podcast text line, that line is 833-455-4368. The word action, ACTION, 433-455-4368. I'm going to give you a 20-minute time slot. We're going to talk strategy, and then you and I are going to take action together, and we're going to execute. That is my promise. I will meet with every single person that texts me, every single one. Whether you think you have something to add or not, you've never gotten started, I'm giving you my time, and we're going to do it together.
This honestly is something to take advantage of. Not just saying that, because this has a potential to be life-changing. If you text action, if you take the action, you could be on a completely different trajectory and see yourself in a year from now where you never would have imagined. If you take advantage of what Tim's telling you right now, this impromptu, honestly, very generous offer. I think that's a great way to wrap up this episode. And thank you so much for, letting us see your heart behind the podcast, letting us see what it is that you do. What's your money maker? Since we discovered, hey, this podcast is more about other people. This
is not making money.
This is not the money maker, guys.
This is like a public service, like a gifting. It's like a community tithe, if there is such a thing.
There you go. Well, buddy, thanks for coming out to Austin. Thanks for recording in my garage, and thanks for letting me interview you.
Thanks for being interviewed. It's actually fun. I enjoy it. Maybe I should go on the interview circuit.
There you go.
Thanks for listening, guys, and we'll catch you on the flip side. See you next week.